Welcome to this, the 11th journey down the Old Shoreham Road to Enlightenment, the world's most open-minded podcast. With me today is an actual music hero of mine and one half of my favorite bands, the Dresden Dolls.
Good evening, friends. What's up, everybody?
All the way from Los Angeles, California, welcome to Mr. Brian Viglione. How are we today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate the chance to talk to you.
I feel that, after seeing you so many times and in so many concerts, I have to kind of like do it as Amanda does it. So, Brian Viglione.
The world's wonderfulest drummer. She's so sweet. I know. I always appreciate Amanda's introductions.
How has your COVID experience been there in LA?
I have to say, remarkably good, probably relative to a lot of other experiences that I've heard. I chose the path during COVID of reinvention and appreciating all of the resources and good people and good things in my life rather than like cursing existence and throwing all of my frustration and why me sort of attitude into it. And that wound up being a very helpful and constructive way to manage the last couple of years. Because obviously, certain people and certain groups of workers have been able to kind of go back and forth or work right through. Musicians obviously were like, in fact, everybody in nightlife was pretty much damn well shut out entirely for a good long time. And I don't really have like much in the way of options like, oh, well, I'll just go back and like work at the store that I was working at before or whatever. So And furthermore, too, if you're a musician who's really driven by a level of passion to do what you love to do, as opposed to like, well, like I play music, it's my day gig and, whatever, I can take it or leave it, but it's, pays the bills kind of thing. I'm like, if I don't play, I'll die. You know what I mean? So that's tough to navigate. You know what I mean? And people with passions like that, I've heard people, like those big wave surfing documentaries, like, it's like when there's no waves, when there's not the thing that you live to do, that's an extremely difficult, like physical existential thing to contend with. And I saw that play out on a lot of my, friends and stuff like that too. Of like, I feel like I'm losing myself, like my life is just slipping away. So rather than let that consume me, I took the chance to kind of like buck up my home studio and reach out to anybody that was willing to do, sort of like internal domestic collaborations and things like that. And that was really good. And then since the beginning of this year, I've only just really expanded the kind of music community out in LA. I have managed to coerce my good friend Adam Silvestri from the band Radiator King, who I've been playing with since 2016, but he was stationed out in New York for 5 or 6 years. And I was like, try coming west. Things have really actually opened up for me. So he just moved out and we have completely reinvented Radiator King. We are now a trio and working with producer Ted Hutt, who's an original member of Flogging Molly and just a wonderful guy. So we've got new music in the works with that. And even though it was funny, like the first couple of months in Los Angeles, I wound up in 6 different projects within the first 6 months of being here, which was miraculous because everyone was like, yeah, sometimes it takes like a year or two to kind of get settled. And it was like, so everything like really fired off. But then as soon as COVID hit, this huge circle of friends I had just made split town, similar to a lot of other places, So, that's the long answer, but it's actually been a pretty good couple of 2 years. And I'm looking forward to, if possible, getting down to New Zealand, fingers crossed, now that the borders are beginning to open up in Australia and New Zealand down there, and to visit Amanda and do some Dresden Dolls work.
We will talk about who is down in New Zealand at the moment.
Yes.
I see that they've introduced a vaccine mandate for indoor dining and venues in California, where you are. How is that affected kind of personally? And
well, obviously, having the sort of social situation begin to open up more and more as vaccines have rolled out and people have become, I think, increasingly sort of simultaneously careful and, at least in my perception, willing to abide by the basic sort of state and, federal and local mandates for masks and whatever. I just went with my friend Adam to see the band Idols play. They just did 3 sold out nights at the Fonda Theater, and the place was packed, and everyone was like slam dancing and moshing away, everybody wearing masks. So I don't know, like it seems to be a fairly reasonable rollout. You know what I mean? Hopefully people are doing what they need to do to just like stay safe and not die. That's, you know what I mean? And life seems to be resuming in a sort of, I was going to say gradual at first, but it's actually been a pretty, I think, effective rollout from what I've experienced. I can't speak on behalf of everybody, but locally music venues have opened up. We've been able to get back to work. Obviously, the thing that has been impeding my sort of, you know, the greater sort of stability of my livelihood is not being able to travel internationally. So, you know, it's a bit of a juggling act, and certainly being able to take advantage of things like unemployment and stuff like that help get me through. That was obviously for everybody a struggle, not being able to do what you need to do, even beyond the limits of limitations. When office buildings began to open back up, musicians were still pretty much screwed because clubs and music venues were shut down. It was sort of restaurants kind of opened and so forth. So it's good. I feel the most settled and the most hopeful that I have probably, you know, in the past couple of years since all this started.
Okay, so now before we get into the meat and potatoes, I'd like to know a bit more about you, as I feel like your partner in crime, Amanda Palmer, is very open about her life online through interviews, her music, and her great book, The Art of Asking. Tell us about, though, where you grew up, the Viglione family, and your early musical influences, especially drummers.
Yeah, well, okay. So I grew up in a very small village in the hills of southern New Hampshire, and, you know, rural life is always an interesting thing to navigate as a teenager when you're sort of busting with the energy and hormones and looking to do things. And so, you know, what took the place of us getting into any sort of deeper trouble than we got into was playing music. You know, I basically, both of my parents had some music in their lives that they brought. You know, my grandfather played organ, and, you know, there was musicians on my mom's side, but my father actually was a drummer in high school and very passionate about music up until he took a job as a sort of a builder, and, you know, doing sort of like home remodeling and things like that when he was a young man. So he passed on that passion to me directly. And I got my first drum kit when I was about 4 years old. And then I really took to it when I was about 8. And this wasn't, like, looking back, is an interesting thing. And a sort of personal detail that I realized was that because of when my parents divorced when I was about 8 and 9 years old, drumming actually became a really potent way for me to keep a relationship with my father as he was around sort of less and less and moving out of state and things like that. And it's funny because that's those really formative years. It's interesting to look at the things of like how they impact you. Where do you begin to build your sense of identity as a person when you're 8, 9, 10, 11, just, you know, sort of like preteen and heading into, you know, being a teenager and those kinds of things. And I consider myself really lucky. My mother philosophically was just like, do whatever you want with your life. It is meant to be lived. I love you no matter who you are or what you choose to be. Just take care of yourself and everything will be fine. And my dad, in a more sort of specific, focused kind of way, was like, you seem to really like drumming. I think you have a wonderful talent for it. Keep learning, keep developing. And he was like a very sort of consistent guiding force in my life with music. Whereas my mother, in a sort of like macrocosm kind of sense, just sort of encouraged me to sort of follow my dreams and follow my heart kind of thing. So that was like a very special kind of complete picture in terms of my parentage and guiding me along the musical journey and that kind of thing. So, you know, I think the fact that I had a house where I could practice drumming and, you know, blast till all hours of the, you know, night pretty much within reason, and friends at my school who came over and like every day, you know, I formed my first band in the 5th grade, and we were like writing our own songs and like writing these like diss songs about other kids in our grade that we didn't like, and recording like, you know, the traditional sort of like, you know, play your instruments into one tape cassette deck and then play that back while you sing the lyrics into another cassette deck on the other, you know, doing like very primitive 2-track recording stuff. So, you know, And my childhood was filled with things of like studying. It was just beyond entertainment, like getting all of these home videos back in the day when you'd have like the Metallica year and a half in the life of Metallica and Aerosmith, the making of Pump, and all of the Pantera home videos and the Marilyn Manson videos. And like, you know what I'm saying? Like all of the things of like in the studio with band X and like on tour with, you know, those were, and certainly all the punk rock stuff too, watching all the like, you know, the videotapes of Minor Threat and the Dead Kennedys and the documentary Another State of Mind, which followed Youth Brigade and Social Distortion, you know, all around the country. Those were incredibly informative, educational materials. And my mom was like, I don't really know what that noise is you're listening to. And I was like, you have no idea. This is the blueprint for my life. Like I'm watching this documentary about a band making its record and learning about what a producer does and what drum takes look like and what a studio, how that all functions and what life on tour is like. And after a while, I think my parents really started to catch on, but it was funny because it wasn't really until the Dresden Dolls got our first bit of press, like in the Boston Globe or something like that, a little mention about the band doing stuff, that it kind of validated all of the preceding years leading up to my move to Boston when I met Amanda. And then my family went, we get it. It's interesting. You know what I mean? People who aren't artists necessarily or aren't in the music business kind of look at people like me and go, what the fuck are you doing? You know what I'm saying?
Those bands that you mentioned, specifically the drummers, which drummers did you appreciate?
I mean, right up there. I have absolutely no bones about saying that Lars Ulrich was a massive influence on me. That guy catches so much slack, but y'all can suck me because like the drumming on especially like the first 4 or 5 Metallica records is like, you can't fuck with it. So bite it. Dave Lombardo, certainly. Vinnie Paul from Pantera, it was a huge one. There's stages, you know what I mean? Like in the early years when I was 10 and 11 stuff, there's a lot of Metallica and I got a little bit more into like Pantera and Slayer. And then certainly like jazz was a big influence as well too. So Elvin Jones, who was the drummer for, you know, the John Coltrane Quartet and led numerous bands and played with everybody and basically, you know, helped move the jazz drumming idiom forward in monumental ways for generations onward. He was, I think, the pinnacle, one of the most profoundly influential people in my drumming and in my life. And my dad took me to see him at the Regatta Bar in Cambridge when I was 11 years old, just before Valentine's Day. And then took me to see Tony Williams, who was, you know, obviously another just like legend, like icon of drumming, the following year. So I got up close to monster players like that. All sorts of different people, you know what I mean? Like I've listened to everything drummers like, you know, Big Sit Catlett and Cozy Cole and Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich and like all the big band guys and, you know, a lot of the funk drummers and stuff like that. Whom I think James Gadson, for example, who played with Bill Withers, like just like one of the nastiest groups. Obviously, the James Brown drummers, you know, for sure. Clyde Stubblefield, Jabo Starks, people like that, just sort of throughout different phases of my life. Do you know what I mean? And then still finding people. For example, my good friend just turned me on to the drummer John Poole, who was Anita O'Day's drummer for years. I mean, the guy's brushwork is so clean and so brilliant and so subtle that I'm still learning as I go. And that's why I love speaking with people about all different genres of music, because you know what I mean? Of learning about all different bands, for whether it's like Taraf de Haiduks, you know, the sort of like Romani, like gypsy music, or Eva Bitova, the performance artist, Czech violinist and vocalist, or Jan Tiersen, or, you know what I mean? There's people from all over the world that, especially through my years touring with the Dresden Dolls, people are like, oh, if you're like in like a Dresden Dolls kind of weird thing, like check out this person, check out Paolo Conte, check out, you know what I mean? And it was like people beyond even just drummers that influenced my drumming, vocalists and sax players, listening to Louis Armstrong, or a way a singer would phrase things. Do you know what I mean? Or listening even to a record like Porgy and Bess, the Miles Davis, Gil Evans recording of that. Learning how to play just so gently and listen to all the like the dynamics and songs like that. Sometimes records like that were more formative to me than like maybe commercial rock and metal albums that you might think that I would be listening to.
While we're on this subject, can we talk instruments?
Yep.
In particular, your drums. What do you use and what's your setup? I've noticed that you have a very different kit for Radiator King than
Yeah.
before. It's very back to basics somewhat. Yeah, could you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's probably it's not really as much to do with changing my sound as it is opposed to just the economy of getting place to place. Believe it or not, the Radiator King kit that I play with is just a regular 4-piece. And the only difference between that and what I play with the Dresden dolls is with the Dresden dolls, I have an additional second floor tom and an additional crash that I use. So, I play with a 5-piece with the Dresden dolls with the double floors and maybe additional cymbals here and there. But I sort of came up there. My setup is actually right there. Pretty traditional. Yeah, and this is a great. Here's a little exclusive I can give you. I don't know if the lighting is the lighting okay. Sorry if it's a little dark over there. So I was working last night. Get all these hats out of here. So I have these like handy dandy microphones set up around the kit. If I need to learn new material, it's very easy to not disturb any neighbors who are actually super cool in the building where I live, but I can actually practice with the rubber pads, et cetera, et cetera. I can even put it for you here, right? So I can work very quietly, record, et cetera. And that particular kit is extremely portable. But so yeah, what do I play? I have been officially an endorsee of Yamaha drums, Zildjian cymbals, and Vic Firth drumsticks since about 2004 and 5, when the Dolls signed with Roadrunner Records and we were out touring a ton. I really kind of like held out for the companies that I wanted to play. My friend Greg, who worked at Jack's Drum Shop in Boston, when I described to him the new drum kit I was looking to get sound-wise, he said, I think I've got the kit for you. He suggested the Yamaha Oak Custom at that time. And I went purely on his recommendation and absolutely loved it. Then in 2010, I wound up getting the Yamaha Phoenix kit, which was like an 11-ply just masterpiece of a drum kit, one of my favorite drum kits I've ever played in my life. And I got to play with that with the Dresden Dolls in 2016 and 17, et cetera, et cetera. But I have like a little Gretsch Catalina Jazz here. That's just like, it was super affordable, super easy to throw in a car. I actually have a Mini Cooper, which miraculously all of my drums and even a guitar and a passenger fit into. So thank you, Minnie. And that helps me zip around the city for local gigs. And then most recently, my friend Alex Burke, who plays in Radiator King, just gave me or offered me, said, my friend is having a mental breakdown and quitting music. He's throwing all of his gear away, but there's a drum kit here. Would you like it? And it turns out that it was like this lovely Premier Artist Maple kit from about 2001. So I spent a day refurbishing this thing, and it's gorgeous, and it has like the Made in England like a little bronze badge on it and stuff like that. And it's an astoundingly beautiful kit. So that I wound up using that on a recent recording with Radiator King, and that's just like a very easy drum kit to kind of like throw in a car on the go or whatever like that. So if I don't want to break down my whole recording setup, and then as soon as we can get the Dresden Dolls rolling again, all the Yamaha stuff will get broken out of our rental space in New York. So I'm excited to get that back in my hands. It's been too long.
Yeah, I mentioned your fellow doll, Amanda. She was in New Zealand on a solo tour when COVID hit and is still there with her young son. How hard has it been apart from your soul sister this long?
I think both of us do everything we can to not think about it. So like the polite answer is like, it's fine. And we fill our time with this and that, when deep down under several layers, it's like, you'll go insane because you can't do it. There's no controlling any of that stuff. You have to find whatever means you can to do something meaningful in your life if you can't do the thing that you were like planning on doing. But it's all good. I have come to the kind of thing of just releasing any sort of desire for control over it. When it happens, it will happen. And fortunately, Amanda and I stay in pretty regular contact over the phone. We had the opportunity to do a really beautiful cover song of "I'm Going to Go Back There Someday," the song which Gonzo sings in the first Muppet film. Right, yeah. So, and that was for kind of a benefit for first responder, health workers and stuff like that back in 2020. And we did a project too when the bushfires were also raging in Australia. When that horrendous catastrophe was going on. My mic is going down. So that, we get little incremental chances to work together. But she has told me, she said, I'm writing, she has a whole slew of new song ideas. And if, everybody send good thoughts out there, if we can, I will try to get down to New Zealand sometime in early 22, so that we can actually begin working again and resume the Dresden Dolls properly.
But what I was going to say is how is the recording and the writing process for you both? And is it kind of like non-existent, or or are you kind of like,
at the moment?
Yeah.
Well, at the moment, as I described, so Amanda, when we're on the phone, she's like, I'm writing all this new material. I just haven't really gotten a chance to kind of like, sit down and record the ideas. She'll either sing stuff into her phone or record a little bit here and there. But yeah, she is like a full-time, basically single mom at this point. And, we were just on the phone a couple of days ago. She's just completely overwhelmed, but also really proud of herself for the job that she's doing as a mother. She's like, I'm doing an awesome job, and I'm cleaning up all like the baby snot and cleaning up all the things and doing all the blah, blah, and Ash is very happy. And so she sounds great. But so we have not gotten yet. That's what I'm saying. Like, if I can get down to New Zealand, then we can actually get in a room, play together, and things will, I think, resume the way that they were many years ago. My favorite way and context to work with Amanda is when she goes, I have a song half finished. Here's how it goes. And typically with Amanda, it's usually some lengthy composition of like 12 minutes. And she's like, I have like 18 verses. Here's the first one. And she'll sit down and it will go. And I'll go like, great. What if we cut down like this? And sort of we begin the kind of editing process and then shaping the material. And one of the fun things about Amanda, in a way, is that like, and I think this comes through just so much time that we've shared playing and listening and developing that sort of intuitive sense about each other and where we're going. But she also, through the rhythmic way that she plays piano, it's very percussive. It almost is, in a way, to my ear, self-evident what she's hearing. And then it's my task to set that rhythm and that propulsion to the music, and then be sensitive enough and listening and responding in those ways to shape it into something that we're both feeling like really happy about. And I don't really think that process is going to change too much the next time we sit down. It's a very invigorating thing for both of us to see those songs come to fruition.
She covers it in her book, but how did you meet her and decide to create this amazing music project together? Which there you go.
Oh, there it is. Hey, all right, that's great.
So
there, I'll put on my special hat for that. Great. There it is, the first album, folks. Yeah. Amazing. What a feat. What a triumph it was, because it was a hell of a process.
It's an absolute triumph. And I would love to tell you, tell us about this.
So that all went back to Halloween night of the year 2000. So a mutual friend of mine had brought me to this Halloween party at Amanda's crazy artist loft where she was living in the south end of Boston. A young woman opened the door and was wearing this white gown filled with glowing Christmas lights. And I was like, okay, this is not your everyday party. Let's see what this is all about. And later that night, Amanda sat down in front of the guests, and in this beautiful room that her landlord, Lee Barron, had created called the Cloud Club, which had this sort of like wall of mirrors and an old spinet piano kind of tucked in the corner. And it just looked like this glorified like Hobbit dwelling, like if some like stoned out like hippie Hobbit had just been like, man, this is like the coolest place. Don't you love my apartment? And it was like that, just like fireplaces and like bohemians strewn everywhere. There you have it. There's a couple of bohemians strewn on the couch. So Amanda did this. She sat down and she played, I think, 5 songs, including Half Jack, Girl Anachronism, Sex Changes, a song called Colorblind, I think, and a song called Caladrina. And she might have actually played Modern Moonlight too, but I remember thinking to myself, having one of those, as they say, sort of like that mind altering, like life shaking epiphanies where you're just going like, everything just seems like it feels like an extreme close up, because I had been on this search myself the past, few years in my life, all through my late teens, and like leaving my home and venturing into the city of Boston, which was like a totally new experience for me, hoping like I didn't really know anybody. And the band I was in was a good learning experience, but not ultimately the thing that I knew I was going to be sticking with. And so when you encounter that thing that in such a profound way goes like, here it is, now what do you want to do? I had that feeling where I was like, I've never seen somebody play with that kind of conviction. She just was attacking the piano, and her lyrics were something the likes I had never heard. The closest thing I could think of was like, I understood that there was a kind of music theater element to it, even though it wasn't exactly Queen. It wasn't like Meatloaf. It was, you know what I mean? Like, but there was something in it that was like, there's somebody who spent a lot of time on a theater stage somewhere in the midst of this composition. But it was also so earnest and so passionate and so punk. Like it just had like this attitude of like, I don't care. This is what's burning in my soul, and I'm unleashing it on the keyboard. So that night, I just very sort of calmly, coolly was like, I really loved your music. I play drums. If you ever want to get together, like, here's my number, give me a call. And a week later, she said, let's get together. I sort of went and kind of prepared the ceremonial practice space and got like some food and some beer and some things. And we just kind of like, whatever. The short version of it was like, when she sat down to play, it was that awkward sort of like blind date first moment of like, oh, so what do you want to talk about kind of thing. And it was, I basically just said, so play me whatever you've been working on. And she started playing the opening line of the song Sex Changes. And I kind of listened for a moment and I followed along, and I started playing this.
Oh my God.
Brilliant song. So and I started playing along the drum cadence, and she kind of stopped and sort of looked at me for a sec. And I was like, kind of getting self-conscious, going like, is that cool? Like, do you like what I'm playing? And she's like, yeah, I can tell this is going to be good. And it was like, okay. And so then it's a bit of a blur, but I remember at the end of that night, we were like holding hands, jumping up and down, going like, we're a band, let's be a band, we're a band, woo! And we just knew. It was like, that was the connection that both of us had been looking for, striving for, like longing for. And when you find your musical counterpart, it's powerful. It's like deep. Do you know what I mean? We're not just two people that were like, oh, whatever, I'm in a band. It was like, we must play or die. It was, freaks of that nature.
Like I said to you, just, when I first kind of like saw you, kind of like, at the Nine Inch Nails concert, I was like, I was stood there with 2 kind of like plastic pints, and I was stood there, and my ex-wife, well, now isn't ex-wife, she came down, and she came down to find me because I've been stood there, because and I've been gone for like half an hour, kind of like 45 minutes, and I've been stood there with these plastic pints, and I was like, oh my God, she's like, well, what's wrong with you? Come on, Mark, what's wrong with you? Mark, what's wrong with you? And I was like, this band is amazing, because we've been to kind of come and see Nine Inch Nails, but and we didn't have any kind of like
context or anything, idea, preconception.
We didn't think any kind of like there'd be any kind of like any decent band. And we were stood there, and I was stood there with 2 plastic pints of beer, and in the London Astoria, and I was stood there, and I was like,
Flabbergasted.
she came over and she was like, well, what's wrong? It's like, this band is brilliant. And it was just like, and she was like, really? This band? It's like, no, they're brilliant. And it's like, I don't know what planet they're from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like,
Planet Weirdo.
this band is from another planet. And this is the one thing that is, you definitely, at that time, 15 years ago, I don't know now, but 15 years ago, you were definitely with the most different band out there, and
well, we it was interesting. We walked a really unique path. There were certainly bands that we've played with that were, I would say, equally, if not more. I mean, one of our favorite bands at the time was a California Bay Area band called Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum. Those cats were different and they were amazing. But the Dresden Dolls, for sure, like all bands that are unique and just go like, we're just going to do our thing and everyone can deal. And either you like it or you don't, but you're going to know what you get is authentic. That was our approach. And that is my advice and encouragement for anybody, not just in music, but in life, is to just be yourself wholly. Don't worry about it. And when you feel a passion within you arise, pursue it and incorporate it into your life. And don't worry about what other people say. Life is big and there's room for everybody, and do what you need to do. Peace. Like you have to adhere, I think. If you're blessed enough to feel a kind of and tune into a kind of vision, if you're an artist and you want to express something from within yourself, and then you happen to be doubly lucky enough that if you're of the collaborative nature as opposed to a more isolated solo artist or a painter or a writer, somebody that can work independently, that you meet somebody who shares that vision, and then compounding the fact that they also share like your approach to how you would want to get that out in the sort of business world and market and promote and like bring that, in essence, bring that music to an audience, to people. Amanda and I both shared that feeling. We wanted to have a positive impact on people's lives, as the musicians who positively impacted us had done. There was a whole continuum that we wanted to incorporate ourselves into. So one of the things that you must learn to do is like how to bring your band to a larger audience and that kind of thing. And I don't mean to be getting off topic, but we were lucky in that sense that the band was very different from what was happening at the time, maybe amongst like indie rock. And that we were probably pretty distinctly different than like Franz Ferdinand or the Strokes or whatever. But there was also the White Stripes were out there and the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and it was a pretty fertile time. And it was also, it's interesting, if you do any sort of research and reading about those sort of early 2000s years, there was an interesting article that noted the kind of connection to the post Moulin Rouge phenomenon. When Moulin Rouge came out, and I think it was 97 or 98, somewhere around there, what followed after was kind of like a wave of interest in the world of cabaret, burlesque, 1920s, Weimar era. And we were kind of already doing, like, we didn't go like, Moulin Rouge, we should do a band like that. Amanda was already writing these songs. We met and both wanted to do music worse than anything in the world. We came upon the decision after a lot of discussion about, do we self-censor? Is there anything that we shouldn't do because it would doesn't fit in the box? This is important information to know about the formation of the Dresden Dolls, relating to your question of like, how did you decide to come up with this cool, crazy band? Our guiding principle was, if you feel it here, play it. I remember it even had relating to drumming. I talked to my dad one day and I was like, I don't know, I've been thinking about drum parts and stuff. And I was like, I wonder if I should incorporate like my double kick drum pedal. Like, is that too metal to do in a drum and piano band? It might be weird. And my dad was like, no, if you can play it well, just play it tastefully. Play it where you hear it. Don't force it. But if you feel it, incorporate it naturally. That's a great life philosophy for anybody. So we applied that very directly to the band, right down to the visual thing. And there's little things along the way. For example, this sort of famed night when we actually went and played at a cabaret night, a burlesque night at the Lizard Lounge in Cambridge. Amanda was like, well, it's kind of the theme of the night to do this burlesque thing. Let's wear some stuff. So Amanda put on like a lacy black bustier and some white face and makeup. And I put on, the bowler hat and a suit jacket. And after that show, we both kind of looked at each other and went, did you feel that? Yeah, I felt that. Did you? Yeah. It brought out, wearing the garb kind of brought out a performative element in both of us that was already lurking under the surface. And we had like staunchly beforehand been like, no costume, totally Spartan, very Boston, New England kind of like, we're just going to play in like, white theater, like tank tops and like nothing and no makeup and black and just be like totally punk rock about it. And then when we put the costumes on, we were like, that worked. It's undeniable. So let's pursue that. And the same thing happened too with like pursuing drag. All of that stuff was like a direct lineage of the philosophy espoused in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. The sort of don't dream it, be it, you know what I mean? Like be free to explore yourself in all of your beautiful, multifaceted, wonderful weirdness. Do you know what I mean? You will find that you'll connect with more people who are looking to do the same thing than not. And so we did that, and hence the inclusion of the brigade and all the kids that would come and perform in this incredible international community of people that surrounded the band.
That's something that I wanted to ask you about. I mean, the art and imagery, whether it be in your records, music, videos, or live performance, seems to be a priority to you both. Where did that come from?
That I think very specifically sprouted from Amanda's. She like the whole aesthetic of like Sgt. Pepper's and bands that had an interesting visual aesthetic to complement the packaging of their albums in particular was something that was like ran very deeply within her and her wanting to express that and include it. And I mean, it fit very well in sort of, for example, like the development of the artwork for the first album. We had this sort of like the dollhouse thing. And it kind of came from, again, the very kind of like punk rock DIY, like all the lyrics were sort of like typed out on a typewriter and cut out. And there was right. So watch, if you open that, if you want to do me a quick favor, pop out the lyric book, open it up to the first page and show these fine people just what we're talking about. Amanda turned her whole living room. There you have it. It's a little bit blurry, but right. So on the inside, that's a beautiful covered, designed and painted by our friend Zaya Barker. Right. And if you zoom in a little closer towards the lens, I don't know if it will focus or not, but anyway, you get the kind of like ransom note style, collage style way, sort of almost like a punk rock zine. Do you know what I mean? It was like clippings of things. And
beautiful.
That wasn't, well, there you go. Right. And so, and that's Amanda's living room right there. That couch that we're sort of splayed out on is like, right, the floor right there was where all that artwork for this and Yes, Virginia was all designed and laid out, and all the beautiful artwork that our fans and kids had mailed in were all sort of like laid out and sorted through, like right on that, in like typical kind of like bedroom art project, punk rock zine style. And that's just like an extension again of like Amanda's. We didn't really go for some like hyper polished, glossy looking thing. It was there to have like a real kind of like earthy do-it-yourself element to the band and how we approached our work and our community. So I think that's reflected in the artwork and in the style and how we used submissions from people and we argued. I didn't do a whole lot of talking and negotiation often in meetings. However, the one time I piped up sort of like Al Pacino in Scent of a Woman when I was like, out of order, I'll show you out of order. Like I jumped in at the boardroom table when we were having the discussion. Roadrunner was notoriously like tight on the purse with bands about packaging, and they were insistent.
I want to ask you about Roadrunner. But
so here, this is a great story. So this was a moment where I have to say, in their defense, they really came around in support of the Dresden Dolls, our artistic vision and aesthetic, and wanting to give our fans our very best. They were kind of going like, well, it's a lot more money per CD to go with this big, the paper case. God, I'm forgetting the name of it. Not jewel case. That was the plastic one. With basically the cardboard folding cases with like the big insert and all the art. They were like, it's way cheaper for everybody if you just do the plastic jewel case. And we were like, no, not going to happen. We have been planning this. We have been building this relationship with our people, that like what we do and the artistic integrity that we want to bring and the vision that we want to do. We don't want to just chintz out on our first major label release. This is a really important thing. We're not just stamping our feet going like, we just want, to have the fancy packaging. That was like part of our whole world. And they heard that. And I said, like, you don't want to shortchange the people that are going to want to support the Dresden Dolls on their label debut, going like, oh, well, I guess Roadrunner, like, shit the bed on them. And they're like, blah, blah, blah. I was like, represent yourselves with us collectively at our very best. And let's give our fans and our community the thing that we've been building for the past 5 years. Why cheap out now? There's no point in doing that. Like, if we do that now, we will secure a relationship with the people that we're actually playing to, that we mean what we say and we deliver what we want to actually, what we talk about, and walk the walk. And Roadrunner was like, we hear you. Okay, we'll back that. And so hence the packaging of Yes, Virginia, with all of the artwork from the fans and all that kind of stuff. And that continued on, down into the next release too. So that was encouraging.
I just want to say something about these albums. When do you have? I want to ask you: do you have an album that you have in your heart that has every single song is absolutely brilliant, and there's no dud tracks on there? We're gonna go dud tracks because I have a few. I love, like, for example, I love Tragic Kingdom by No Doubt, and there's a song in the middle there. It's called End on This. That doesn't need to be on there. There's another, there's brilliant songs. There's brilliant albums by brilliant bands. There's always a song on there that is
feels a little extraneous.
It doesn't need to be on there, but there is not a dud track on there. It is absolutely brilliant all the way through. And also, Yes, Virginia, there's not a dud track on there. It's also brilliant all the way through.
Thank you. I mean, it's interesting. The track selection. Go ahead.
Is there is there an album that you could say that is absolutely,
just perfect tip to tail? I have to say off the top of my head, and maybe this is like, I hope this doesn't sound like a cop out, one of those records for me that just beginning to end, I just go like, this is a fucking masterpiece. Actually, there's two. I'll throw this out there. The first one,
I'm not saying your albums are a masterpiece, but I'm just saying
no. I'm saying for me, like the record that, like, you're asking, like, if I listen all the way through, Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd is one of those records for me that I just tip to tail. That's a journey. That's also, it's not distantly related to the way we approached pacing and thinking about like Dresden Dolls records too, thinking of them as a whole piece. Where does this record take you on this journey? Do you know what I mean? As opposed to like, well, here's a single and there's a single and here's some like filler bullshit that was like, fill up the CD time. It was like, we wanted to make sure that the songs, that there's a cohesion to and how there's an art form to making a record that brings you from one place to another. In that sense, that the songs can also stand on their own. But there's one of those things. So to me, Dark Side of the Moon is one of those. I have to say the Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails. It's not one that I put on like all the time, every single day, every day, but that to me also is a perfect fucking record. It is so immaculately just conceived of, drawn from A to B, and the places that music brings you, and still decades after its release, to me sounds fresh and incredible to listen to. It's just remarkably powerful. On a separate tip, I'll tell you another one, and this might be kind of a funny one. I actually think the Weezer's like Blue album is kind of perfect, like tip to tail. I love the Blue album.
Yeah.
Every time I listen to that, I'm like, there's not a weak track on this. And even like, was it Only in Dreams, the last track? I'll take it because that's a super cool closer and a beautiful kind of emotional buildup. But that like gets right to the core.
Absolutely.
So that's one for me. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I could go down the list. There's a lot of, I mean, not a lot, but certainly records too. I'll give you a jazz record too. I Feel Kind of Blue by Miles Davis is a perfect record from start to finish. Takes me on an incredible journey. Same thing for A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. Yeah, there's definitely those albums, which for me, it's like you want to sit down. And I'll do you one more. In the Aeroplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel. That is an incredible record that for me starts with those opening guitar chords, and through the last moment when you hear Jeff Mangum put the guitar down and walk out of the recording booth, you're just like, remarkable, like outstanding.
So how did Trent Reznor come across the Dresden Dolls?
This is his words. I saw the video for Girl Anachronism on MTV and I didn't know if I loved it or hated it, but I knew it had something, end quote. And that was said to us on the stairs in the backstage of the London Astoria in, I believe, February 2005. We were like, thanks so much for having us tonight. Why are we here? And he said what I just said. And we were like, well, this is great. We're really looking forward to the tour coming up with you in May. Thank you so much for having us. And the Dresden Dolls played 31 shows with Nine Inch Nails in the US and Europe. Unbelievable. That was a huge turning point for the Dresden Dolls too, in two senses. One, that it like steeled our resolve to play, because we were like, if we go out and suck, these people will literally kill us and throw things at us and it could be bad. So we just went out for blood every single night. And Amanda at times was picking up my cymbal stands and smashing my drums with them. And we were just like going absolutely like ham the whole time. And that tour is what actually led to my involvement playing with Trent on the Ghosts album in 2007 and 8 with that. But the other thing about that Nine Inch Nails tour was that it easily like tripled our fan base. We would play our little 35-minute, 40-minute set and bolt straight to the merch table and just talk to everybody. And we met so many cool people, and props to the Nine Inch Nails audience, because they really received the Dresden Dolls very graciously and in a really open-minded way, in keeping with your lovely podcast. Whereas we did not fare nearly as well when we toured with Panic at the Disco. Those kids had zero patience for our like arty shit, as they felt. They were like, bring on the boys in the tight pants and get this fucking crap out of here. That was a tough tour, the Panic tour, and the Nine Inch Nails is the exact opposite.
Because I just honestly, you're a no-brainer for a Nine Inch Nails tour when you think about it. Piano and just beautiful lyrics, and it's yeah. No,
we're like yeah, we're definitely we're in the family. We're kind of like second cousins kind of thing. It's not like bringing like an industrial rock band out, or like having like the Crew Shadows or whatever, something, you know what I mean? Like come out and play with Nine Inch Nails. We'd be like, oh, well, two like sort of gothy industrial bands playing together. Duh. Like the Dresden Dolls are like always like, this could turn out good, or it could be like a full scale riot and people throwing vegetables. We don't really know.
So you came back a year later. You came back a year later and did your own show at the Astoria, and I saw you at Reading too, both in support of Yes, Virginia. Again, another album that has no dud tracks on it. What songs on those two albums are you most proud of?
Ooh, most proud of? There's a few standouts, actually. One of my favorite tracks on Yes, Virginia is the song Modern Moonlight. That song I always felt was like a fantastically interesting song. And Modern Moonlight existed well before me. That was on one of the original demo tapes that Amanda gave me in like December of 2000. when she's like, since we're going to be playing together, like, here's my stuff. This is all the things that I've recorded on my Tascam 4 track as like a trippy, like teenager on the thing. And Modern Moonlight was one of those tunes. And I was like, this is really absolutely cool. And a similar kind of weird industrial tinged tune called Man Machine. Amanda also, in her, as a side note, was influenced by the pianist and artist, I think from New Zealand or Australia, Peter Jeffries, who used to play distorted piano. And so there's some tracks on there with Amanda playing distorted piano and like lots of interesting vocal layers and things like that. So several of those early demos made their way to Yes, Virginia. Also, similarly, Sex Changes. Like I said, that was an older song. And we found ourselves during the selection of sort of culling through the best of Amanda's previous material that we worked on, mixed with all of the new songs like the Jeep Song and Truce, juxtaposed against Girl Anachronism and Half Jack, etc., and new songs at the time like Coin Operated Boy, and finding like, again, what felt like the most cohesive journey of those songs to take them on. And so Gravity made it on there. 672 was just an interesting kind of like mysterious bit, you know, to tie in that sort of links back to Amanda's love of the legendary Pink Dots. And then again, when we came time to, this is an added benefit too of that Nine Inch Nails tour, we really like honed our live show and sort of the energy and the energetic trajectory of what we wanted to do as a band on that Nine Inch Nails tour. And so rather than being kind of like a sort of like, well, let's explore and have fun and see what we want to do, we're like, we know exactly what we want to do. Get us to the studio now. Like that was like sort of like, and it was like War Machine time. Like when we went into record, we were doing drums and piano and voice, and we were just going to like get in there and crush. And you can hear, I think, a difference in the playing. There's a very, I don't want to say reserved approach to the playing on the first album, but there's a lot more aggression happening for sure. And a lot more, a kind of confidence of like, we're fresh off tour and we're ready to fucking murder. Like that's, I think, evident in the playing on Yes, Virginia too. So that captured that. But it was, again, songs going like, we could play Sex Changes better as a band by the time we recorded it in 2005 than we could when we started in 2000. You know what I mean? But I'm really honored and pleased to hear that you feel like that there's no filler or weak songs on the records, and that's always a good feeling.
No, there's absolutely both of these records. There's I mean, when I honestly when we were going to do this interview, I was like, there's got to be. I said to myself, there's got to be something. There's got to be something that I could kind of like, kind of say that there's, you know, I've got to criticize something, but then I was like, no, there's everything is just it's just brilliant. No, just brilliant.
I wore some really terrible outfits in my day. You can criticize that. I'm sorry, I looked like such a frigging goofball, but I have to say, part of my terrible fashion sensibility of wearing like dress shoes, tights, and like knee shorts was kind of like a rebellious, like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like this is so stupid looking that I'm going to do it just because.
Which will bring us to.
Yeah.
Which will bring us to that same year, 2006, you headlined 2 shows at the legendary Roundhouse in Camden, London, which was captured on DVD. Highly recommended, but they were very different shows, weren't they? I was at one of those shows. How brilliant were they?
They were the most brilliant shows ever played in the world. I mean, what can I say? If you weren't there, I'm sorry for you. No, I don't. I mean, how brilliant were they? I mean, those shows were brilliant, I'll tell you, in the sense, the least of all because of our abilities, and most of all because of the people that attended those shows from all over the world. That was the pinnacle moment of having people from the United States, I think South America, Australia, and all over Europe like flock to that event. I mean, just so many. So the 15th anniversary of that just rolled past on November 6th. And I did some posting about that on social media with some beautiful photographs from our friend Pixie, who was there to capture the night. I have to be honest, like that was a culmination for me. And in a way, something that people like may not really know, that was kind of the end of an era that night. It was a quiet, somewhat private and solemn moment of gratitude, but also a recognition that things were changing. Those were extremely, I can't underscore it enough, difficult interpersonal years. And thank goodness we were able to keep the band rolling through that. But it was like an incredible celebration to have everybody there for those shows as a way to say thank you so much for all the love and the commitment that you have shown, not just to the band, but like to each other and to yourselves and what you bring to this world. You know what I mean? If the band could be a conduit for people to like live a richer, more exciting artistic life, amazing. We step way back and allow hopefully the music and the people and what they share to be the real focal point. And for me, that's what the Roundhouse was.
No, you encourage local artists to perform in the space. And you brought kind of like, just everybody that wanted to come in and perform. Mm-hmm. And you don't get that in bands don't do that. And I think that perfectly encapsulates what you do for for your what you do for your for your fans. You don't do this. Bands don't do this normally. It's right. Incredible.
Well, that's an extension. So for example, it's a very like honest extension of where we come from as people. When I met Amanda, she was basically doing the same thing, just on a sort of a much smaller, like micro level, throwing these art soirees at the Cloud Club, where multidisciplinary, artists would show up and do poetry readings and art installations and various performance art and music and things like that. And they grew into sort of larger, backyard garden parties where it went from like 60 people to being like 250 people to all of a sudden there was like 400 people like showing up at these parties, around like 2005 and 6 and stuff. And it was just, again, it's kind of like a circus mentality. That's where the kind of like that, the traveling, run away and join the circus. And it was not just us. We maybe had a slightly stronger organizational sense about us. Maybe that's a New England thing. I don't know. But like, we definitely were like, all right, we're going to organize everybody. And then you guys use the Shadowbox forum to organize yourselves. And when we go on tour, let us know where you're going to be and come and do crazy stuff. And we will just make this, again, like similar. I mean, that groundwork was laid with probably lots of different things, but for us, Rocky Horror in a way was the most recent and accessible resource for us to kind of go like, well, if they can do it and people get dressed up and have fun and it's like a interactive experience. Like I always wanted to be Frankenfurter in the Rocky Horror Picture Show and I never could. So instead I got to be me in my own band. That was amazing. And Amanda, the same thing. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't about like ripping off Rocky Horror. It was like going like, all you need to do is put out the call to your people to come and congregate and then do a thing. Most bands go, it's all about us. Worship us. We're the cool band. It's not about you. It's about us. Thanks so much. We'll like pay some lip service and go like, yeah, it's all about, we have the greatest fans in the world, blah, blah. But also other bands, it's, for them, it's kind of like about the music. It's cool. I'm not dissing on anybody. Do what you want to do. We just had a sort of an element of like this kind of circus performer cabaret thing that invites that kind of little bit of like extra, you know what I mean? If you go to a show, sure, get some kids out on the stage dressed as like human marionettes playing accordion, like doing juggling acts and like wearing weird face paint and like drawing amazing like chalk artwork on the ground and anything else you can possibly conceive of. I like, for example, the Flaming Lips. I'll give the Flaming Lips their due. The Flaming Lips at a lot of their shows I mean, those guys are amazing. Do you know what I mean? They do that, but they come out of like the psychedelic rock world, right? So they're wanting to go like, and they'll have their friends. They'll have like a bunch of people from the audience or volunteer people come up and dress in Santa Claus outfits or do whatever and be on stage with them. So if anything, like the Flaming Lips are very akin to what the Dresden Dolls also do in that sense. But you're right, it's not really that frequent that you find bands include their fans like that.
No, I spoke about it to the Soap Girls on my recent podcast. The fact that it's really important to kind of like engage with the fans and everything, and they do something that is really, really, really unique, and also it reminded me of what the Dresden Dolls do with how they are just wonderful in their kind of like, you know, how they kind of like you know, how they're brilliant with you know, how with their fans. Your fans are really, really important to you, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the fans are an intrinsic, you know, part of what we do. You know, as I said, that it stemmed from these kind of like art soiree parties where it was like from the word go, there was sort of an open invitation to come and participate on whatever level feels good to you. And I wound up writing the initial post to our old website when we were getting ready to throw our CD release party in September 2003, that actually verbalized and articulated for the first time to the fans, we are making this CD release of our first album a big celebration. So go raid grandma's closet and your attics and everything and every, you know, possible thing, and come donned with your, you know, your Sunday best to the celebration, and you know, participate, join in with us, you know, add something to it. We want to create an atmosphere. We don't want it to just be like, you stand there, we stand here, and then everybody pays their money and we go home. It's like, let's actually make this together. That's fun to put out, because that's like, again, it's like the thing of collaboration. You can dictate and be like, you do that, you do that, you do that. But when you go like, well, this is what I'm going to do. What do you think? Like, what do you imagine going here? Setting people's imaginations free to infiltrate and fill out all the mysterious, unknown, empty space is one of the exciting things, because then you tap into that magical unknown that brings you something greater than the sum of its parts. Do you know what I mean? Then you tap into not just telling people what to do, but you tap into inspiration itself. And then that is like a ripple effect that goes throughout a music community or a fan community. And people then inspire each other and re-inspire each other. And it carries out. And we saw that happen to an incredible degree across the world.
Are the Dresden Dolls writing and recording remotely?
Well, yes. So as I mentioned earlier, yes, Amanda is currently writing now. She emailed me or messaged me just a few days ago, and she's like, the Dresden Dolls write the best like breakup song ever. This is so exciting. You know, she's got a whole lot of new ideas. She's not able, like I mentioned, because her motherly duties and parental duties are pretty intense and demanding right now. She's not been able to really record. But the idea is this, essentially, is that we're able to get together, work out some new material, record a new album, bring that to Roadrunner, and then sort of one of two things happens. And this is important for fans to know, because everyone has been going like, why don't you guys just record? Totally fair question. We can't just record. A whole bunch of things need to happen in a specific order for us to get a new Dresden Dolls record out. And that's what we're trying to get in line for everybody, so that there's an awesome new Dresden Dolls like release for everyone to enjoy. So that entails us getting together, writing, then recording, then working out if Roadrunner will release the record or release us from our contract and we go like independent, or we go to a different record label or what have you. So there's several options to get to, but yeah, the long and short of it is new music is coming.
Okay. Can we talk instruments? In particular, your drums. What do you use and what's your setup?
I think we covered this one. Remember I talked all about the Yamaha stuff? Yeah. That's all we covered that all. I remember I got the Yamaha Oak Custom and then the Phoenix kit and the Premier kit and then Gretsch stuff.
Okay, before we finish up, could you tell us about what
I think you might have gotten everything.
Before we finish up, could you tell us about the song Sing?
Sing, yes. Sing is one of our favorite songs.
Yeah. Could you tell us about how it came about and the memories and about the shoot of the amazing video?
Yeah, so the song Sing was an exploration for Amanda in writing about larger sort of world issues and perspectives, which was a bit new for her because she had been writing from a pretty autobiographical sense about her own life and experiences and a lot of very personal sort of family issues like in Half Jack or sense of feeling like misplaced, like with Girl Anachronism and things like that. Or Sex Changes, for example, was written about various people's experiences that she knew and was able to kind of write about in like a character sense. Sing was a way to kind of like take a look at something that felt like a more kind of global perspective. And has turned into one of our sort of most beloved songs. And something that I wanted to mention too, an artist that I'm going to be currently working with at the end of this month, an absolute phenomenon of a vocalist up and coming in the jazz world, even though she's well established already in many circles. Her name is Veronica Swift. She covered Sing on her incredible new record called This Bitter Earth. And both my mother and my manager separately emailed me the link back in March of this year and said, you need to hear this version of Sing that this Veronica Swift has done. It's remarkable. And I'm going to be joining her to play her arrangement of Sing at the end of the month. And she told me, she said, the Dresden Dolls made such a massive impact on me as a listener when I was younger. And I wanted to represent that too and give a shout out. So in a way, it's beautiful to see the lineage of that song travel from 2006 with the Dresden Dolls to 2021 with such a remarkably talented person who's bringing that same message out on her album. And then for me to get to kind of work with that. So that was beautiful. And it's about bringing people together. And the video shoot was, again, very much that. My little sister Maya actually makes an appearance in the video shoot, all of our good friends. And the general idea of that was to having, very similar to the world of the Dresden Dolls, was a living tableau. So many of our friends got together to kind of recreate famous iconic photographs, whether it's the World War II, the sailor kissing the woman, or Buto figures or religious symbols and things like that, all painted together, sort of showing this kind of like international unity and hopefully breaking down of the types of barriers that often keep people apart and keep from a deeper kind of sense of connection and understanding of each other.
Tell us about Radiator King.
So Radiator King is another current band that I'm working with. Very exciting. My old buddy, Adam Silvestri, who I met back in 2016 when he was making a kind of Tom Waits Rain Dogs inspired album called A Hollow Triumph After All. And our producer buddy said, if you're looking for weird trash noises and bizarre beats, Brian's your guy. And meeting Adam, I felt like I was just like meeting like a cousin of mine. He was another New England kid. We totally like related to each other right off. And like I said, I had since coaxed him out to Los Angeles, and we're now performing as a trio. And the idea, in a way, musically, is to kind of bring together the sensibilities of both The Doors and The Birthday Party. That's kind of like where we're starting to head. Adam had been doing, again, sort of like a kind of junkyard kind of thing for a while, and then it sort of explored an Americana sensibility. But now, since going trio, we were interested in exploring some sort of like darker, wild and wieldy kind of terrain musically. And both the Doors and the Birthday Party have been much talked about in our circles of the kind of, you know, moods and extremities where we want to go.
What was it like touring with the Violent Femmes?
Touring with the Violent Femmes was exceptionally fun. And having been such a huge fan of them as, you know, a kid in high school, it was incredible to be. I mean, the Violent Femmes music was part of my musical DNA, and so really kind of digging in and learning those songs, and then get to go out on stage every night and perform that stuff. It was a really interesting challenge too, because playing the stand-up drum kit with no kick drum and having John Sparrow, who was providing the sort of bass drum rhythms on cajon, was really interesting. So it was kind of fun in a way. We were kind of like a percussion section together. And where normally a drummer is getting used to relying on having that big downbeat on the kick drum, here I have sort of John providing that, and I'm finding new ways of exploring how to get power without having a whole lot of like thud in my particular sound. But the Femmes are great. You know, you hit stage, Brian Ritchie like will bellow out from, you know, 30 feet away what the next songs will be like, add it up, you know, like, guess off. Like there's no set list. It's totally informal. It's just like a back porch jamboree gone wild. And yeah, you just get out there and go for it. And that's the kind of energy that I love. And the Femmes, you know, they have and have that in spades. So to get out and perform those guys, and then do 2 albums with them, the Happy New Year EP and the We Can Do Anything LP, were great experiences in that sense.
So what is next for Brian Viglione?
Well, what's next is, again, building with Radiator King. Veronica Swift, if I'm able to do more shows with her, she has a residency coming up at the Blue Note in New York City, which she's invited me to come sit in at, which will be great. That's at the end of January. More local sort of area shows, if not national touring with Radiator King, and hopefully getting down to New Zealand to do some concerts and some writing and recording with Amanda and the Dresden Dolls.
Do you have to go down to New Zealand to do that? Do you have to go down to New Zealand to do that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Brian Viglione.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very, very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark.
We will talk again some other time. Cheers,
Will
man.
do. Cheers, man. Thank you.
Bye.